All right, let's dive into Orion Taraban's The Value of Others.
Yeah, this 2024 book, it really tackles relationships from, I'd say, a pretty unique angle. He actually compares them to economic transactions.
It's kind of like he's saying, instead of treating relationships like this, I don't know, taboo thing, something we can't really talk about,
Right.
he's
Yeah.
saying like, hey, let's get real about how these things actually work, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think he makes a good point there, It's like how we used to approach the human body, all these taboos and mysteries, right?
Totally.
And as we learn more about it, as medicine advanced, we got better at taking care of our physical health. So maybe looking at relationships through a more, I guess you could say, analytical lens could help us build healthier connections too.
So I'm curious, how does thinking about relationships in terms of economics actually help us understand them better?
Well, Taraban's central idea is that relationships are essentially about exchange and value. Where there's an exchange of value, there's a relationship, right? And where there's no value being exchanged, well, it's probably not a real relationship. What do you think about that idea?
Okay, so I'll be honest, when I first heard that, it did sound a bit cold, like reducing something as complex as human connection to just a transaction.
I get that.
But the more I thought about it, the more it kind of started to make sense. Because if you really think about it, right, the things you value in a friend,
Yeah.
those are different from what you value in a family member or a romantic partner.
Exactly.
Right.
Like with friends, you might prioritize, I don't know, shared humor, fun experiences, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But with family, it might be more about loyalty, unconditional support, that sort of thing. And then with a romantic partner, well, you've got intimacy, shared goals, and of course that spark of attraction.
So it's like we're constantly exchanging these different forms of value, right?
Yeah,
Which means sometimes those exchanges can get out of whack. Is that where this whole sexual marketplace idea comes in?
that's exactly right. Now, I know the term sexual marketplace might sound a bit I don't know, jarring at first.
Yeah.
But it's not about literally buying and selling
Right,
people.
right.
It's more about understanding the dynamics of attraction, how we negotiate, how we assess potential partners.
Okay, so let's say I'm ready to, I don't know, step onto this playing field, so to speak. What are some of the uh, unspoken rules I might be missing?
Well, one of Taraban's key points is that we're not just playing one game, right? It's more like a series of what he calls nested games.
Nested games.
Yeah, think of it this way. Your goals in the baiting game, they're influenced by your bigger life goals, right?
Hmm.
Your career aspirations, your desire for a family, your personal growth journey, all of that kind of stuff. All of it impacts what you find attractive in a partner.
That makes sense. Like a student who's, struggling financially, they might prioritize stability and support in a partner.
Right.
While someone who's already successful, they might be more drawn to ambition and excitement.
Exactly. And those priorities, they're constantly shifting as we move through different life stages. So what you're looking for in a partner can definitely evolve over time.
All right, so we're navigating this sexual marketplace. We're playing these nested games. We're constantly exchanging value. And then Taraban throws in this metaphor that, honestly, at first I was kind of like, what? This whole captains and passengers thing.
Yeah, this is where Taraban dives into the I guess you could say the power dynamics that are inherent in most relationships.
Okay.
He suggests that in a lot of pairings, there's a captain who's the one providing resources and direction, and then there's a passenger who's seeking those things. Now, he's not saying this is how it should be, but it's a pattern that's been around for a long time, you
Yeah.
know? Historically, men often take on the captain role and women the passenger role.
So he's not making a value judgment.
Right,
He's
exactly.
just saying, hey, this is a dynamic that exists. Let's look at it.
Exactly. Let's look at it objectively.
Okay, so if we take this metaphor a bit further, what does it actually mean to be a successful captain in this context?
Well, Taraban outlines three key challenges for the captain.
Okay.
First, they got to build their ship, right?
Right their ship.
Yeah, this means developing themselves, acquiring resources, knowledge, building a life that can support others. It's about personal growth, being emotionally mature, having your act together.
So it's not just about, like, material resources, right?
Yeah.
It's about being a capable and reliable partner.
Exactly, yeah.
What about the second challenge? He mentioned learning to sail.
Right. Sailing is about mastering seduction and frame control. Now, before you get the wrong idea, seduction, as Taraban defines it, isn't about cheesy pickup lines or anything.
No.
It's more about understanding how to, generate and direct attraction. And this is a skill set that anyone can cultivate regardless of gender.
So it's not about manipulating someone. It's about understanding that kind of dance of attraction, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what's this frame control all about?
Frame control is essentially setting the terms of the relationship, establishing boundaries, maintaining your sense of direction. A captain who can't hold their frame, they might get pulled off course by a demanding passenger, and then, well, their ship could end up shipwrecked. Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that could be a problem. So what about the passenger? What are their responsibilities in this whole dynamic?
Taraban gives the passenger 3 prerogatives. They get to inspect the ship, test the captain, and ultimately choose the journey. Think about it. Before committing to a relationship, you'd want to make sure your potential partner has their life in order, treats you well, shares your values, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's essentially what he's describing here.
So the passenger isn't just passively along for the ride. They're actively evaluating the captain to make sure it's a good fit.
Precisely. They're assessing the captain's qualities, how they handle pressure, whether their goals and values align with their own.
It sounds like both the captain and the passenger have important roles to play here.
Definitely.
And a successful relationship kind of depends on both parties understanding their responsibilities.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing this is just like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these power dynamics in relationships, right?
You're absolutely right. Taraban goes much deeper, exploring how these power dynamics play out in, like, everyday interactions.
Okay.
And that's what we'll unpack in the next part of our deep dive.
So we've talked about this idea of exchange in value in relationships, this whole sexual marketplace and those nested games. But I'm curious, where does power fit into all of this?
Well, Taraban kind of digs deeper into these power dynamics with this concept he calls the game of please no. Basically, it's a framework for understanding how people get what they want in any relationship, not just romantic ones either.
So it's kind of like he's breaking down those mechanics of, I don't know, negotiation and persuasion.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give us like a real life example of how this game actually works?
Sure. Imagine you need help moving.
Okay.
You're the one who wants something, right?
Right.
You ask your friend to help, they're the potential giver. They can either say yes or no to your request. Sounds simple, right?
Yeah, but I have a feeling it's usually not that straightforward.
You got it. Because both you and your friend, you both have your own, like, unspoken motivations and strategies.
Right.
You might emphasize how much you need their help. You might offer to buy him pizza afterwards. Maybe even, I don't know, play the guilt trip card.
Oh, yeah.
Your friend, on the other hand, they might weigh their own commitments, how much they value your friendship. Maybe they just really don't want to help you move.
So even something as simple as asking a friend for help can turn into like this whole complex negotiation.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Each person trying to kind of nudge things in their favor.
Okay, so does Taraban offer any insights into how to handle these power dynamics effectively? Like without turning into some kind of, manipulative mastermind?
Yeah, he lays out 10 principles of power that can help us understand, I guess you could say, who holds the upper hand in any given interaction. Like, one principle is that the person who initiates contact less often, they tend to have more power.
Interesting.
They respond slower, they have more options, they seem less committed.
So it's like playing it cool. Like
Yeah.
that can be a powerful tactic, even if you're not doing it intentionally.
It can be, and it might be a deliberate tactic for some people, but for others, it's just their personality. Either way, the point is, whether we're aware of it or not, these power dynamics are always there, humming along beneath the surface. Taraban wants us to become more aware of them so we can make more conscious choices in our relationships.
So it's not about becoming like a master manipulator. It's about understanding the forces at play.
Yeah, exactly.
Does he give any examples of how these principles of power play out specifically in romantic relationships?
Absolutely. One of his most, I'd say, compelling, maybe even controversial ideas is this concept of the attraction gap. He argues that it's pretty much impossible for two people to be equally attracted to each other in a relationship. There's always an adorer and an adored.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that dynamic play out before. It's like the more one person chases, the less interested the other person becomes. Is that kind of what he's getting at?
Yeah, that's part of it. He also suggests that this gap can be amplified by the adorer projecting their own fantasies onto the adored. Like they build up this idealized image in their head.
Right, right.
And then, well, reality never quite lives up to those expectations.
Yeah, we all have our own projections and fantasies, especially when we're, first starting to fall for someone. But how can understanding this attraction gap actually help us navigate relationships in a healthier way?
For one thing, it can help us, I guess, keep our expectations in check. If you're going into a relationship knowing this gap likely exists, you're less likely to get swept up in those, like, unrealistic fantasies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It also encourages us to cultivate our own sense of self-worth,
Yeah.
not relying on someone else to validate us.
So it's about recognizing that some level of imbalance is natural, but being mindful of those dynamics, making sure both people feel respected and valued. I'm curious, though, how does Taraban apply all this to the challenges of modern relationships? With dating apps and social media and all that.
Well, that's where his analysis gets really interesting and maybe even a bit uncomfortable for some. He argues that modern technology, shift in social norms, and the easy access to certain types of online content, it's all created a whole new set of challenges in the sexual marketplace.
Yeah, I can see how those factors really shake things up. Can you give some specific examples of what he's talking about?
Sure. He points to the invention of birth control as a major game changer. It separated sex from commitment, which had a huge impact on the power dynamics between men and women.
That makes sense. It gave women more control, more freedom to navigate relationships on their own terms. Does he talk about how this impacts men's experiences?
He does. And he brings up some potentially sensitive topics. Like, he discusses how easy access to pornography might impact men's pursuit of real-world relationships. He also points out that women's economic and social empowerment has given them more options, which means they're less likely to settle for partners who don't meet their needs.
So it's not like these changes have only benefited one gender at the expense of the other.
No, not at all.
It's created like a whole new set of challenges and opportunities for everyone.
Exactly.
And it sounds like he doesn't shy away from the potential downsides either.
No, definitely not. He suggests that all these factors, combined with, the rise of social media, this illusion of infinite options, it's kind of led to a crisis in modern relationships.
A crisis.
Yeah. He argues that it's harder than ever to find and maintain lasting connections. He even predicts that the traditional model of marriage might not be viable for a lot of people anymore.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement. It sounds like he's not just analyzing relationships. He's also making some pretty big claims about the future of, I don't know, society as a whole.
He is.
But if the dating world is getting this complex, does that mean we're all just doomed to, like, flounder in this sea of ever-shifting dynamics?
That's the question, isn't it? Luckily, Taraban doesn't leave us high and dry. In the last part of our deep dive, we'll look at some strategies he offers for navigating this whole new relationship landscape.
Okay, so we've explored some pretty, I don't know, thought-provoking ideas about relationships. But where do we go from here? Like, how do we actually navigate this modern dating world with all its complexities? Does Taraban offer any, like, practical advice?
He does, and it's actually kind of inspired by the business world. He talks about this hire, slow, fire fast approach to relationships.
Hire slow, fire fast. That's a pretty interesting way to put it. I mean, it's not like we're interviewing candidates for a job, are we?
Right, but the idea is similar. It's about taking the time to really get to know someone before jumping in. Yeah.
Pay attention to those red flags, trust your gut, and don't be afraid to walk away if something feels off.
I think a lot of people, myself included, can be guilty of rushing into things without really thinking about compatibility.
Yeah.
Like, we get caught up in the excitement and ignore those little warning signs. Does Taraban give any tips on how to avoid that?
Yeah, he really emphasizes the importance of self-knowledge.
Yeah.
Before you can even start looking for a partner, you got to be clear about your own values, your needs, your goals.
Right.
Like, what are you actually looking for in a relationship? What are your non-negotiables? What kind of lifestyle do you want?
So it's like he's saying do some soul searching before you even step into the dating arena. Because if you don't even know what you want, how are you going to find someone who's a good fit?
Exactly. And once you have a better understanding of yourself, then you can start assessing potential partners with a more, I guess you could say, critical eye. Do their values match up with yours? Do they have similar goals? Are they genuinely interested in YN, or are they just drawn to your, I don't know, your lifestyle, your status? Yeah, that's a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in someone's, I don't know, charm, their lifestyle, their potential. But if that's all it is, the relationship's probably not going to last, right?
Right. Taraban warns against mistaken attraction to someone's circumstances for actual attraction to them as a person. It's about looking beyond the superficial stuff and seeing if there's a real connection.
So it's about being more mindful, I guess, more intentional about our choices, really evaluating if someone's a good fit, both like practically and emotionally. But what about those deeper needs, those things that maybe no one person can fulfill. Does Taraban talk about that at all?
He does, and this is where his perspective might challenge some traditional ideas about relationships. He acknowledges that no single person can be everything to us, and expecting them to be can lead to disappointment.
Yeah.
He even explores alternative relationship models like polyamory, where people are open about having multiple partners.
Now, I know that's not for everyone, and I don't think Taraban's saying it's the right way or anything, but it's interesting that he's encouraging us to question our assumptions about what a relationship should look like.
Definitely. It's not about throwing out traditional values. It's more about recognizing that the landscape is changing, and what worked in the past might not be the best fit for everyone now.
So it's about being honest with ourselves about what we need, and then I guess having the courage to create relationships that work for us, even if they look different. But even if we are open to exploring new models, doesn't that whole economic lens still apply?
Absolutely. In fact, it might be even more important when you're navigating those non-traditional structures.
Right.
It's about being upfront about what you're exchanging, whether it's emotional support, shared responsibilities, intimacy. Are you getting a fair deal, so to speak?
So transparency and open communication are key, no matter what kind of relationship you're in. It's about empowering ourselves to make choices that work for us, regardless of what society says. But after all this talk about the complexities and challenges of relationships, does Taraban offer any hope for finding lasting love in the modern world?
He does, and it's actually a really insightful point. He suggests that those things we truly value, like love, friendship, loyalty, they actually flourish best when we're clear about the, let's say, the business side of things.
It seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Like focusing on the practical aspects would make a relationship less romantic, less deep.
Yeah.
But he's saying it's the opposite.
Exactly. When we address those practical needs, when we set clear expectations, when we communicate openly about our desires and boundaries, it actually creates a stronger foundation for love and intimacy to grow. It's like clearing away the clutter so those deeper connections can blossom.
That's a great way to put it. So he's saying by understanding those economics, we're not actually taking away the magic. We're just giving it a better environment to thrive.
I think that's a pretty good takeaway. It's definitely something to think about.
Well, listeners, that wraps up our deep dive into the value of others. It's a dense book full of ideas, and we've only scratched the surface today. Hopefully this has given you some new perspectives on relationships, some food for thought.
And maybe even some tools to apply to your own life.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep talking about these things.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.